Let's dive in, shall we? So thank you all again for joining us today for our active shooter and safety preparedness webinar hosted by Planned Companies with our special guest Matt Butler. So today from our team, we're going to be having Matt Butler as well as Demi Little from Plan going over our active shooter presentation, talking about how it applies towards all our verticals from multifamily, condo, HOA, commercial, and as well as in the general world application. For those of you who are unfamiliar with us, Planned Companies, we've been around since 1898. We provide industry-leading janitorial, maintenance, concierge, and of course, security services. We are located all across the East Coast. Our headquarters is in Parsippany, New Jersey, all the way down to Miami, Florida. And we also have a nice operation in the West Coast in the San Francisco metro there. And one of our commitments is to provide education on compelling topics to all of our clients and prospects. So that brings us to today for active shooter. It's unfortunately a very relevant topic, but we have our experts here who will break it all down for you and how you can be prepared both for yourself as well as for your on-site operations. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to my friend Matt. Matt has over 17 years of experience in the Marine Corps. He's an active law enforcement officer and has a plethora of accolades that I'll let him share with you all as we get into things. So, Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Joseph. Welcome, everyone. Go a little bit into this course and who I am. So, again, my name is Matt Butler. I've been a cop in California for about 16 years. I've been a Marine for 17 total years. I did about 8 years active duty time. And then the other half of that's going to be as a reservist as I've gone full time as a police officer. You can see some of my key assignments that I've done, some of the certifications that I've acquired throughout my lifetime. Probably the most significant for this period of instruction is going to be the active shooter instructor one that I have, and the stop and bleed instructor. We'll talk more about the stop and bleed program as we go further into this slideshow. So without further ado, let's get started. So what are we going to talk about today? Understanding active shooter situations, what they are. And to help us better understand that is going to be some FBI statistics that we're going to go over. We're going to talk about some pre-event indicators. This is something that I'm pretty passionate about talking, because we, as people, tend to do better planning after things have happened. And I want to do what we can to give people as much prep time as we possibly can give them, whether it's 10 seconds before an event happens or it's 10 months. Talk about some physical security considerations, personnel training considerations, and immediate actions upon an active killer. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. Like, what do you do when bad things are actually happening? And then understanding law enforcement response. What are we supposed to do as civilians? What's the expectation from law enforcement for us? And what you can do to make yourself safe and be more of an asset than a problem.
And real quick, guys, we're going to be covering a lot of great content. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the QA button below, and we'll be monitoring that, and we'll answer all your questions at the end of the 15-minute Q&A. Sorry, Matt, back to you.
That's good. Jump in anytime. You and Demi, anytime you want to jump in, jump in. Okay, so let's get the initial stuff out of the way. Active threat, different than an active shooter. So an active threat is any situation that presents an immediate and ongoing danger to safety, which can include the use of weapons and or erratic behavior. So for example, in China, just over the weekend, on Saturday, they had 8 people killed and 17 people wounded on a knife attack outside of a vocational school by a former student. And then, so that doesn't really fall in the category of a shooter because there's not a firearm being used. Also in China, just recently, on the 12th of November, they had 35 people killed in a vehicle plowing or a vehicle attack where this attacker decided to get in his car and drive around on a sports track and hit people. Super violent stuff, very tragic. It's hard to talk about, but this is unfortunately the world we live in. Yeah, it's the world. This is happening worldwide. So that's kind of some examples of an active threat. And then we have the active shooter, and that's one or more individuals actively engaged in the killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. So the characteristics of an active killer incident: deliberate, pre-planned attacks, Obviously, their intent is to hurt as many people as they possibly can. Typically, they've been historically male, although that's not always the case. Typically, they're carried out alone. Usually, yeah, alone, sometimes two, not hardly ever more than three individuals, just to get that level of planning going on it. There's only maybe just very few cases where it's actually three individuals. And then primarily uses handguns. However, now these killers are starting to use rifles. Okay. Perpetrators. It'll go right down to the bottom bullet point. It could be anyone. It could be a terrorist. It could be a coworker, members of the public, former spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, anyone. And where do they occur? Well, anywhere. But you may be surprised here that they have happened on military bases before. We know they've happened in shopping malls. We've hear about them happening in movie theaters, and of course schools, unfortunately, and places of worship. And so, transitioning to the FBI statistics, this hyperlink here, we'll be able to share it with you, or you can do a quick Google search and just search up like 2023 FBI active shooter statistics, and this will just come right back up. It's like a 54-page document. I'm not going to go over all 54 pages. It is quite interesting, though, the amount of detail they go into, talking about each and every incident that occurred during that year. And then they get published about 2 years behind the power curve, or about a year or two behind where we're actually at. So I'll cover some things that I think are relevant to us. So here's a map of the United States. We can see in 2023, all the active shooter incidents that occurred throughout the nation. California had 8 with 47 casualties. That includes both people that were killed and wounded. Maine had 1 with a significant amount of people injured or killed, and that's 31. Texas 4. So you get an idea throughout the map where these things can happen year in and year out. And in this FBI statistic, they'll actually do a comparison between like 2023 compared to 2019. Pretty interesting document. And they talk about like times of day, weekdays, what weekdays were most popular for active shooters or active threats, what months of the year, and typically it's when things are warming up. That will also be an indicator of it too. So, all right. Some different categories they have as far as locations. You have places of commerce like malls, businesses closed to pedestrian traffic. That might be like a warehouse or assembly plant. Businesses open to pedestrian traffic like a mall, things of that nature. Education, anything from K through 12 and on higher, so like colleges and stuff. Government, military properties that are closed off to the public, and other government properties that are open to the public. So think about your local Department of Motor Vehicles. That's a government agency that's open to the public. Healthcare facilities, houses of worship, open spaces, and that's going to be like, that could be an open freeway, open highway, a park, any open space, and then a public or private residence, single or multifamily residence. On the next page, you'll see that there are 48 incidents that occurred in 26 states, resulting in 244 casualties. 48 of the 49 shooters were male, and 15 met the definition of a mass killing. So if you look at the casualties below that, I think it's pretty interesting to see that we have 2 security guards that were wounded, 12 cops that were wounded, and then 125 civilians that were wounded. So you are seeing some security personnel, whether it's civilian law enforcement or security personnel, getting involved in this. And you can also see that several of them lost their life in 2023, 2 law enforcement officers and 2 security guards, and then 101 to kill. So below that, working our way down, see that 30 people were apprehended, 7 killed themselves, and then 12 were killed. And then of the firearms used, the vast majority are going to be handguns. There's like 1 shotgun used, and the rest were rifle. Here, the big takeaway on this slide, I know it's pretty small, the print is, but for us is that middle page, that graphic showing basically 42% had a known connection to the location or person. And then the other 58% had no known connection. So it's fair to say that, almost half, and this statistic varies year by year, but generally about half or just less than half of people are going to have some sort of relationship to the shooting location or the target individual they're trying to hurt or kill. Okay, this is where I really get excited, because this is where I feel like we can do the best at preparing ourselves to be safe, and our family safe, and our places of businesses safe. So there's this whole strategy or this concept called left of bang. So if you think about bang being the critical incident, and it could be anything from, you drop your bowl of spaghetti at the dinner table. What could have been prevented in that? Because that incident is boom, that as soon as that bowl hits the ground and shatters, that's the incident. Or when that bomb goes off, or when that gunfire goes off, that's the incident. So there's always some type of pre-event indicator that leads up to that. And then of course we have right of bang, which is all the response. And that's where really law enforcement shines, because it's really hard to be predicting things. It's difficult. And to get right of bang is the easier thing to do. We're more responsive as human beings anyway in our nature. So that's why all that side of the house is pretty much polished, I would say, until we get to right of bang, like super far out onto making sure people get help they need with mental health counselings and things of that nature. We could probably do a better job with that. So let's really focus on the left of bang stuff though. So there's two things: baseline establishment and an anomaly. So everywhere we go, there's a baseline. And so think of some common areas that you visit. For me, example would be, I probably get to one or two Starbucks. They're the same Starbucks every single week. And I visit them, 3 to 5 times a week, depending on how tired I am and how much needed for caffeine I need to have. But that Starbucks at each location's, one is more in a small town, the other one's in deep in the city. And they both have similar baselines, although a little bit different, because the one in the city has a little bit different clientele than the one out in a more rural area. But I can kind of tell the difference. When I come into the Starbucks in the rural area, there's usually, if I walk inside, 3 to 5 people in there early in the morning getting their coffee and getting out. I don't see much anything else than that. No one's really having any big conversations. Usually it's the same staff. There's, maybe 2 to 3 baristas in there. So that's the baseline for that location. I also have a baseline for my neighborhood. You have a baseline for your neighborhood, for your local parks, for your local places of worship and businesses. And so that's where we measure, because through continued observation. And if I was a Marine out deployed into a far off land somewhere, I would observe an area or a target location for as long as I possibly can to establish a baseline. And the better idea of a baseline I have, the better I can identify anomalies or these strange things that happen. So an anomaly is anything that rises or falls above or below the baseline. And we analyze every anomaly. An example would be like a vehicle out of place, lack of presence of people, or a change in the mood of an area. So I'll share one story for you. A few years ago, probably about 10 years ago, I was at my house, and I was living in a residential community at the time, and my bedroom window backed up to the street. And it was like a Wednesday night. It was probably around 9 p.m., so not too late. And my neighborhood back then was really a quiet neighborhood. Well, I heard this car pull up, which is it's not normal. It's not unnormal, right? But then it just was running for probably like 2 minutes, just sitting there idling. And that's kind of strange, because most people at 9 o'clock at night are just going to pull in to their driveway, turn their car off, go inside and go to bed. So I took a peek out the blinds, because that's anomaly number one. I took a peek outside the blinds, and I noticed the car was parked the wrong way on the street. Anomaly number two, and it had no license plate. Actually, the license plate was flipped upside down, so you couldn't see it. number three. And number three was a pretty strong anomaly because my background in law enforcement tells me that if someone's concealing the identity of their vehicle, it's because they're trying to, at the most innocent part, avoid registration, but probably they're trying to hide the fact that they're about to commit a crime and they want to conceal the identity of their car. So that's a pretty big anomaly for me. So I went outside, I grabbed my, this is just me doing what I do as a cop. I grabbed my off-duty firearm, concealed it on my person. I walked out in between the vehicles on my driveway. And as I'm walking out, the dude had already exited his car, smashed my neighbor's window, her vehicle window with a little bit of porcelain, and then ripped her purse out from inside of her car. She wasn't in her car. She had been in her house long before that, but for some reason wanted to leave her belongings inside of her car with all of her valuables in it, and it didn't work out very well for her. So he ended up snatching her purse. I identified myself, and it didn't work. He jumped in his car and sped off down the street, and I ended up calling 911 and helping her file a report. All that to be said, though, is that if I'd have been a little bit quicker and made myself my presence known, that I might have deterred that whole situation without even having to say a word. I could have gone out there and just pretend like I'm checking my mail at 9 p.m. That's me with my level of training experience, the fact that I was going out there armed. So I talked about some cues and some clues and what caused me to make a decision. And this is the decision guide I want to leave you with, is that sometimes single clues are not enough to decide unless they're a very significant clue, like there's a dude that just walked in the front lobby with a gun. Okay, I don't need any more little clues to tell me that something bad is about to happen. But sometimes, and if we take the clock further back to the left, you're going to have to be better at analyzing this stuff. And it takes a really long time to get good at this pre-event indicator stuff and analyzing human behavior. It can take 10 years before you really feel like you got a strong handle on it, to be quite honest. So that's why it's important to continue up on this training as as you go through life and these different opportunities. I'm super happy and stoked that you guys have all jumped on to this webinar to learn, because it's super important. And if you've done anything like this before, you'll know that you're going to learn something new, probably every time you get in front of another instructor. So, okay, back to the decision guide. So once you get a cluster of these anomalies, 3 is typical of like where we would say, hey, it's probably time to make a decision. A conclusion may be developed and a decision made. And here's some possible decisions. And this decision guide varies from like what a person's job is. So me as a cop, my decision tree is going to have some different options than a civilian. Just for example. And so from one of the obvious reasons to be that cops are law enforcement officers. They're there to serve and protect. They're there to, stop violence from happening. And they are, number one, they are armed. So, but possible decisions that are kind of just in general would be, number 1, leave the area. Number 2, observe and report what you see to 911 from a place of safety. And number 3, you might contact them, or you might ask a manager or security manager or security guard to go and contact the individual based on the anomaly. If it's something significant and it's dangerous, it's obviously dangerous, then maybe contact doesn't need to be made. Maybe we're going into an observe and report to 911 from a safe location. To help us see these anomalies, we look at behavioral domains. So there's 6 behavioral domains that we talk about. And here they are. Let's go over them real briefly. Kinesics, biometrics, proxemics, atmospherics, geographics, and heuristics. I'm not going to go into each one in detail. You can read them on the slide, and there's a rabbit hole that falls from each one of these behavioral domains. There's a really good book out there called Left of Bang. It is written by Marines, and it has a kind of a Marine lingo and talk, and it's more for like a theater of war, but there's a lot that you can take and apply it to your personal life and your place of business to enhance security and just make yourself a little bit more observant as a citizen. So let's talk about biometrics. That's somebody who is giving off this physiological reaction to the stress that they're under. So for example, it's a winter day, you got a person coming in and they're heavily sweating, right? Their pupils are all blown out, and you're like, okay, this is not as far as the baseline of everybody else in this workspace that I'm in, this person's different. That could be an anomaly. Absolutely. If everybody else's baseline is the same, like, okay, that's not right. That's one thing there, one example. People whose biometrics that are off are people that are under stress, that are under the influence of a controlled substance. Their biometrics are going to be all messed up. Another interesting one is proxemics. This is a really good telltale sign to buy some seconds before an event uh, comes your way. So, for example, if you're at a sporting event and you've seen it on the news before or different videos on YouTube, there's a fight that breaks out in the stands. A lot of people will tend to like gravitate towards that. Well, that whole brawl is going on. You'll see this proxemic like gathering that happens. And then conversely, you can see a proxemic push where a crowd will begin to flee and run away. So if you're on one side of the football stadium and you see a huge proxemic push go on, and maybe you're so far away you can't see in detail what's going on, but that push might be enough to tell you, hey, I think I'm just going to displace. I'm just going to move out of here. I'm going to get out of my seats. I'm going to take my kid. I'm going to take my loved ones, and we're just going to start moving away from this, because before you know it, that proxemic push and that crowd that's being scared could spill over onto your side of the football stadium, for example. Proxemics also go all the way down to interpersonal relationships. We all know the standard distance, conversational distance between you and a loved one versus you and a stranger. So if you have a stranger coming up to you and they're very close, that's odd. That's very odd. Okay. And then what's another one here? Geographics, the interpretation of relations of people and physical surroundings, physical geography, weather, and the human environment, anchor points, habitual areas, natural lines of drift, reference points, and landmarks. Let's go swing over to anchor points and talk about those real quick, because I think I'm guessing where most of you all are employed is a type of anchor point where there's going to be guests or workers that go there are there for a particular reason, and it's maybe not just open up to the entire public, right? So when think about like a great anchor point example is like a outlaw motorcycle gang clubhouse. Myself, Matt Butler, a cop, is not going to walk into the Hells Angels bar and go have a beer. It just is not going to happen. You'll see anchor points where people are wearing similar type clothing. So again, using that outlaw motorcycle gang example, they're going to wear their motorcycle cuts. There's going to be a bunch of motorcycles parked out front. Or if it's a church on a Sunday, you'll see that, churches are typically open to everybody, but there's a certain dress that's everyone's wearing. People typically dress up on Sundays to go to church, or there's a certain dress code at work. And specifically where I work in my day job at different government buildings, when I'm doing security assessments, I can see like what the standard worker bee is coming in, what they're dressed in. Usually it's some sort of professional business attire or business casual, but I can tell when someone's walking up just based on how they look, and even their walking motion, their perspiration, how they're grooming, if this person is going to be agitated, if they're going to be a problem, right? So I can start to get a little bit ahead of it, and I'm not completely caught off guard. There's some administrative preventive strategies. Okay, so reporting and reporting mechanisms. To maximize observation and reporting of warning signs, organizations and communities should foster an environment of shared responsibility by designing a strong violence prevention program, developing reporting mechanisms that are easy to understand and use, creating organizational policies and structure to implement these concepts to encourage reporting, provide training for upstanders, leaders, and threat managers to ensure effectiveness. So having a robust violence prevention program is really a must, I think. So people are aware of it and getting continuous training out to the employees. Ultimately, a culture of shared responsibility will further the goal of prevention. And talk a specific example about that is when people have to pass through a security program, like they have to go through a scanner, like if they're going through a courthouse, or maybe their place of work is a sensitive place of work and they have to like take everything out of their pockets, put it through the tray on the assembly line, everything gets x-rayed like if you're at the airport. It's important that those employees know not to get upset by the process, to embrace the process, because it's going to make everything safer. If you think about those security guards that are, looking at those x-ray images and having to tell people, 100 times an hour, hey, please take your belt off, or hey, can you lift your pants up so I can see, your shoes, whatever, that they're not getting hassled. Because when I've seen this happen, where security guards will get hassled by essentially their coworkers or people they're trying to protect, they're not going to do as good of a job. They're not going to want to ask tough questions that might be tough just to a normal everyday person doesn't like to ask another person, say, hey, can you open your coat for me? Can you take your belt off? Did you get everything out of your pockets? Those typically aren't fun questions. And as human beings, we don't like to ask them. So why make it any tougher on these security guards? So I would say just make sure that all workers and people that are coming into that place of business, if you have that type of security system set up, good on you, number one. But number two, that make sure everybody's on board with it and understands that, just to be really cool as they go through that process. Lastly here, develop an emergency action plan, ensure employees understand the plan and have a regular refresher training, and share that plan with local law enforcement partners. Physical security strategies. We want to limit and control our access and entry points. We want to make sure our first responders have access, and that we have camera systems that are able to see faces and license plates. So two things I'll cover right here is, number one, have a good relationship with your local law enforcement partners. They want to help you out. That's why they signed up to do the job. I mean, I'm speaking for myself too. That's why I signed up to the job, is I want to help people. So make it easy for them. Invite them to your security meetings, whether you do them quarterly or biannually. Invite them out there so they can take a look at the property and get an eye for things. So if something does happen, it's not the first time they're actually on the property. Camera systems, there's nothing that's more frustrating than wanting to, as a law enforcement officer, bring justice for a crime that's been committed and not being able to get the evidence I need to do that. And sometimes cameras that are being used they look like they're from the 1992 videos. You can't make out numbers, you really can't make out faces. And so it's hard nowadays to get prosecution on cases, because juries want to see what they see on TV, on all these cool CSI shows and stuff. They want to see all the whiz-bang evidence out there. And if they're seeing a pixelated video, it's not very appealing to them. So they may be a little bit less wanting to press the guilty button, right? So, okay, moving on. Visible security measures. That's in-view security, warning signs posted, proper lighting, all old school, tried and true methods for ensuring security. And then our comms plan, our communications plan. In the military, we use something called the PACE plan. Feel free to steal this and use it to anything you want in life. It's a good way to foolproof any plan, whether it's you're going on a road trip with your family, or for this example, it'll be a communications plan. So for example, maybe your primary form of communication at your place of business might be radios, and then the backup might be cell phones, landlines, text communication, and warning lights. It doesn't have to be in that particular order. Like make it make sense to you and your company's needs. I will say something about warning lights that I'm quite fond of is, if there's like a front lobby area of your place of business and there's something going on there that's not cool, and people in the back of the business need to be notified to maybe evacuate the business, you could have installed say some like blue warning lights, or some sort of visual recognition system, so that the person in the very far back of the office in that last cubicle, without an audible warning, can actually see, okay, a silent alarm is going off. I'm gonna just go out the back door. Meet and greet with your local emergency services. Again, this is huge. I think you should have a very good working relationship with your local law enforcement partners. They want to help you out, like I said. One of their main things is, hey, we want to get in there to see, like, where should we place our cars should something go on? And if you got to change the gate code because maybe you just terminated an employee, or it's just time to change the gate code, then make sure that on that email chain that goes out, that law enforcement partner has been updated, so they can update the rest of their department with that information. You guys, most of you all probably are already doing this. I'm just saying it again. But also for me, if I am going to be making entry onto a structure, like responsible for a lot of government buildings in California, we like to go and see those buildings and know, like, hey, where's the attic space? Is there a basement? What is this room layout look out? And how are these doors engineered and all these things, so that we have a better plan, so that when something happens, that we're not just trying to think of it on the fly. It's all been pre-planned. Okay, active threat medical kit placements. Many of your businesses might have, I'm sure they have fire extinguishers, and they might have some AEDs and maybe some regular first aid kits for like cuts and boo-boos and stuff. But when you talk about active threat, active shooter, a common side effect of that is going to be traumatic bleeding. So lots of blood being lost. And so these active threat medical kits will have some different things in them, like tourniquets, pressure dressings, hemostatic bandages, and occlusive dressing or chest seals for gunshot wounds to the upper thoracic portion of the body. They're not too complicated to put together. If you have any questions on that, you can always hit me up. I can help you get the list of items you need to put those together, and or different companies you can go to that are reputable for that. I would definitely warn against going and getting active threat medical kits or tourniquets that are just the cheap ones off Amazon, because they can break, and when you apply a tourniquet, you want it to work. You don't want to cheap out on this stuff. You want to make sure you get a really good one. And then post-evacuation routes throughout your facility. Training strategies. Supervisors should have ongoing discussions and exercise with their employees. Invite your law enforcement partners to come out, familiarize themselves with the property. And then group-specific training recommendation. And this is just Matt Butler's recommendations based on different employee classifications. So if you have your security personnel, it's my recommendation that they're trained in workplace violence, behavior analysis training, stop the bleed, active threat civilian response is another class I offer, tactical combat casualty care, which is kind of a more enhanced medical class. It's nothing too crazy, but it's some different considerations and some different medicine to apply to get someone stabilized so they can get moved to the next level of medical care. Next after that would be non-security employees, which basically be everybody else. And that would be workplace violence, prevention, behavioral analysis, stop the bleed, active threat civilian response. And then residents, you might consider hosting a stop the bleed class for them. A stop the bleed class is a very simple 1-hour class, and it just teaches people how to put on a tourniquet, how to stop traumatic bleeding from everyone from an infant all the way up to, the oldest of adults. And it's this worldwide movement, really, to get people trained on stopping what is the most common cause, or stopping the most preventable cause of death, which is traumatic bleeding. Great program, very easy class to do. I remember my mom teaching a first aid class. She was like the lifeguard for the community that we lived in. We had like one pool for all these houses, and she was like the lifeguard lady. And every summer she would put on a couple classes for the residents on like CPR or basic first aid, and they all loved it. So this could be a really cool class to offer to your residents if that's something you can do. Okay, hasty individual planning and mental preparation tips. So whether, place of business or not, maybe you're on a family vacation, a trip to the mall, or a community event, it's always best practice to have a plan. Even a hasty plan might provide enough time and distance to save lives. So number one, have a plan. If you are put under an immense amount of stress, and that's what would happen if something bad happens, like an active threat or active shooter scenario, we're not going to be able to think with our full and ready mind. Our heart rate's going to be probably in excess of 170 beats per minute. You're going to be breathing fast and heavy, and you're going to go into panic mode, right? And so we're going to really stop thinking like human beings and kind of go a little primitive to keep it simple. So what we want to do, and what you're doing today, is we're creating these mental pathways so that when something happens, hey, I can do this, or I can do that, or I was taught this and I already have a plan. Play out scenarios in your mind. This is something cops do all the time to nauseam, is play out scenarios in your mind. I'm currently at a hotel away from home, so I played out a scenario in my mind if something goes on at this hotel room, in my room, or down at the restaurant at the bottom, wherever I go. Remember, ignoring these issues doesn't make them go away. And these skills are perishable. You've got to continuously get training on this. Anytime you see these type of seminars or webinars or community events that are talking about protection, go and check them out. Entrance and exit points with routes, that's good to know. Adjacent parking areas and structures, those are really good places to hide and protect yourself from bullets, quite honestly. A list of contacts and key personnel. Memorize key numbers in case your phone is lost. First aid kit locations and locations of adequate cover, and we'll discuss cover here pretty soon. What is cover versus concealment? Okay, so that was everything left of bang. Now we're going to talk about right of bang. This is where terrible acts of violence are occurring. Now, what can I do to increase my chances of survival? Hopefully, all that left of bang stuff, if it didn't actually prevent the event, maybe it bought you 10 or 15 seconds of time to get a head start. I'm pretty sure every one of the participants here today would probably pay a lot of money if they were given a 5-second head start before someone said, hey, I'm going to throw a hand grenade into this room, for example. Okay. There's indicators that hopefully you're learning today that would say, you know what, maybe my decision guide is as simple as I just get up and leave and I observe what's going on from a further away location, a place of cover or concealment. And then if I saw something that maybe I overreacted, then I'll go back and do what I was doing before. Okay, but now we're going to talk about right of bang. Okay, so run, hide, fight. That's the concept here. When an active shooter is in your vicinity, you must be prepared both mentally and physically to deal with the situation. So let's talk about running first. If you're running, you're a harder target to shoot. This is super tough stuff to talk about, folks. I know it's not fun. I can't believe this is the world that we live in, but it is, unfortunately, and we have to talk about it. Have escape route and plan in mind. If you work at your every day where you work is the same location, whether it's a cubicle or a front desk or an office space, have your escape route in mind already. You should already be done. And then also have your alternate escape route in mind. Think about that PACE plan, a primary, alternate, contingent, and emergency. Leave your belongings behind. There's no need for you to grab all your luggage if something cranks off at the baggage area of an airport. Evacuate regardless of whether others agree to follow. You are unfortunately the minority here when it comes to people trained on how to deal with this stuff. You are going to not be so as surprised as others. People, when this stuff happens, there are people who are literally watch it happen And they don't move because they're fear struck, or they simply cannot believe what's going on in front of them. And their brain is taking a long time to process that, like, oh my God, people are actually being shot in front of me. Where you maybe heard shots, didn't need to see it happen, but you already know, hey, Matt told me if I hear shots, that's a major anomaly in this baseline of a quiet office. I'm out. Goodbye. I'm leaving. Help others escape if possible. Just direct them in that, and if you already savvy on this and you already have your primary escape route, be like, hey, follow me, we're going this way. Don't attempt to move the wounded. Prevent others from entering the area where the active shooter may be. Keep your hands visible and call 911 when you're safe. Okay, hiding. Obviously, we want to hide in an area outside the shooter's view. Now, lock the door or block entry into your hiding place. Silence your cell phone, including vibrate mode, and remain quiet. And consider having several door wedges and a hammer at a potential hide location. So we have, you know, the little small rubber door wedges can work. There's other materials out there that are specifically designed for active shooter events where we need to do a hard lockdown. And think about some other things you could do that would make it hard for a shooter to gain access to the room you're trying to hide into, right? And we'll watch a video at the end of this that will really demonstrate that quite well. But it could be anything from office furniture to wedging a chair underneath the door handle, things of that nature. If anything, it's going to buy you time. Cover versus concealment. Essentially, cover stops bullets and shrapnel, and concealment makes you not be seen. That's essentially the difference there. A cover could be something you could be seen, but like bulletproof glass is a form of cover, but not really concealment. Good places for cover is vehicle engine blocks, axles, heavy duty metal parts, steel dumpsters, construction equipment, concrete pillars, large water fountains, escalators. Next time you go for a walk or you go outside or anywhere in your place of business, look for places that would be good places for cover. And a bullet is nothing more than a little rock that out of a pistol is flying generally about 1,000 feet per second. And out of a rifle, it's 2,600 to 3,000 feet per second. So they're moving pretty fast, but they're little rocks and they're shaped in a way to penetrate. So we want to get behind things that are going to be able to stop something of that speed and that kinetic energy, and that's why I list these things before. Like a drywall on a house, you could shoot a rifle. It's probably going to go through every wall of that house. On a regular 3 or 4 bedroom structure, it'll probably just punch through every wall unless it hits some studs along the way. All right, the last one here is fight. Fight is a last resort and only when your life is in imminent danger. Attempt to incapacitate the shooter, act with as much physical aggression as possible, improvise weapons or throw items at the active shooter, and commit to your actions. Your life depends on it. In the Marine Corps, we have a saying, it's called one mind, any weapon. So we're trained to look at anything on the battlefield and use it as a weapon if we need to, if times are that dire, okay? And you need to be able to take that kind of warrior mindset to your office space and put yourself in that kind of warrior mindset for a moment and look around like, what could I use here as a weapon if things went south? Okay, is it a letter opener? Is it that fire extinguisher? Do I have a paperweight I could throw? Whatever it is. But we have to have, and not everybody has this, but you can train towards it, is getting this fighting warrior mindset to a degree. And it's not like the most natural thing for human beings to do. It really isn't. We don't want to hurt one another. And I'm glad that's not a natural thing for us. But in the world we live in, we have to have that capacity to defend ourselves and defend our family members. And the last thing I'll say about this is that develop a plan. If you're in that room with another person, you may have to take lead on this. And that plan could be as simple and as quick as saying, hey, man, I'm going to go for the gun. You go for his head. And that could be the plan. If this guy gets in here, you go for the gun, I'm going for his head, or whatever your plan is. Okay, information is vital. If you do have the opportunity to call 911, number one thing we want to know is, where is the active shooter? How many shooters are there? Physical description of the shooter, number and type of weapons used, and then the number of potential victims at that location. So let's break this down kind of one by one. If you can just get a general location, the best you can do, great. You give what you can give. Obviously, the more exact location we get, the better our response is going to be. Typically, the training is cops are going to move towards the sound of the violence, the sound of the gunfighting, the sound of people screaming, where they think the trauma is occurring. That's where law enforcement is going to respond to. Number of shooters, it's very often where you will see in many cases where there's only one shooter, but there was reported to 911 to be multiple shooters. And that's just general chaos that happens in the situation. And that is also an indicator of why, when the one shooter goes down, why does it take hours to make the scene safe? Well, that might be because there was maybe 2 or 3 other reports of several other shooters that were there. And that was just false information. That was just people seeing things they didn't see. Physical description of the shooter, be as descriptive as we possibly can. This is a cool memory game you can play too. When you meet someone new, ask yourself 5 minutes later, hey, what was that person wearing? Were they wearing a white shirt over black pants? Something like that. Number and weapon and type of weapons the shooter has. This is relevant in that we as law enforcement kind of want to know what kind of guns we're going up against. A pistol's capability versus a rifle's capabilities are far different. And then the number of potential victims at the location. If you think about one case, an example is the Las Vegas shooting. Lots of people were killed and injured. And when 911 got that call, they were notifying any level 1 or level 2 or level 3 trauma center in the area and getting those doctors spun up to get themselves ready, jump in their cars and go to work so they can start working on patients. So this trauma train goes all the way down to that trauma doctor's house, wherever he's at, if he's on call, to come in. And if there's a shooting where there's a small number of injured, say less than 5, then that might be something that one hospital can handle, depending on the area you live in. But if it's 30, that's going to require a lot of resources. And so knowing that information is vital to emergency personnel. When law enforcement comes, they're basically going to come in 2 waves. This first wave, this is what you need to do. You need to remain calm and follow their instructions. Don't have anything in your hands. Keep your hands up and your fingers open. Keep your hands visible at all times. Put yourself in, like right now, you may not be able to do it at that time, but right now, try to put yourself in that cop's shoes, running into potentially a gunfight, probably a gunfight. And they're scared and they're nervous, but they're trained and they have all their kit on, so they feel like they're strong. Want to make this job as easy on them as possible. Avoid quick movements towards the officer, such as holding or grabbing onto them for safety. Avoid pointing, screaming, or yelling. Don't ask questions when evacuating. Especially if they're hearing gunfire, they're 100 miles an hour to the sound of the gunfire. That is what they're told to do. And that is kind of a nationwide training model for all cops from California to New York. Your first officers arrive on scene will not stop to help the injured. And then later on, they're going to form a rescue task force, an RTF team, a rescue task force. So you have your first groups of officers, they're going to arrive. If I arrive on scene and then I get a partner with me, if I got 2 dudes with me, we are rolling. If I'm there by myself and I feel like rolling on my own, I can do that. There's nothing saying that I'm not allowed to do that. But typically we want to roll in with 2 or 3 other cops with us when we're rolling to go get in this gunfight. But like I said before, they are just there to do one job, and that is to stop the violence, stop the killing. Now, the next wave of officers is going to be that RTF, that rescue task force, and that's where you get some medical personnel. So say like one paramedic or EMT surrounded by 2 or 3 cops, and then they're going to start rolling to the casualties and treating them on scene as fast as we can. And then they're going to start the whole triage process and all this stuff. That's how it's supposed to go. And if if there's one shooter, but there's been reported to be multiple shooters, this process can get a little bit slowed down. I mean, there's only so much we can do to practice for this real world event. So, but that's typically how it happens. You're going to have those initial responding officers just take out the threat, and then the follow-on wave is going to be these rescue task force that are going to be a combination of medical personnel and cops to go in there and start doing medical assistance and establishing security. It kind of really puts out everything I've been talking about with all that right of bang stuff. Post-incident care, remember, trauma doesn't end on scene. And this is, you know, many of us here today probably have experienced some type of trauma in our life, and that there's nothing wrong with asking for help. There's nothing wrong with it. So if you even think that you need help, talk to somebody. And if someone's talking to you and they're sharing some of their trauma with you, be a good ear for them, be a good resource for them, and know that maybe you're not the professional they need to be talking to, and be a good friend and direct them towards those resources. And as employers, I think we should have those resources ready to go, so that when something like this happens, maybe there's a packet that says, hey, these are your resources that are available to you, even though it may already be up on your company's website for them. But even after seeing that somebody's reaching out to them, someone in management is reaching out to them and letting them know that the company's going to be there for them, and they're going to be doing what we can to take care of them. This is something that law enforcement has gotten a lot better at throughout the years, especially in my 16 years being as a cop. We see a lot of some bad stuff, anything from car accidents to gunshot wound victims and things of that nature. And cops need help. And we're just human beings like anybody else. So if we need help, I would imagine that anybody that's seen some traumatic event, whether it's like I said, a car crash or death of a family member or someone close to you, whatever it could be, there's help out there, and please go get those resources and take advantage of them. Also, conducting critical incidents with debriefs with your local law enforcement and government agencies is encouraged. You know, they could maybe, if something kicked off and it wasn't a huge deal, maybe there's something that we could do. You talk to your law enforcement partners about, hey, what can we do to prevent this from happening that almost happened or did happen? Okay, and that is basically it for me. The number one thing I want to pass on to you all is get continuous training on this. It is perishable stuff, especially the left of bang and behavioral analysis. This is something that you can, you know, take away and have fun with, quite honestly. People watching, for example. But it takes time to get good at it. So, and follow your instincts. There's that kind of that sixth sense. It's a real thing. Make sure you're following that. But all those behavioral domains and those things we talked about, those anomalies, things that you probably already intuitively know. But now we're just kind of giving you a better roadmap to know where you're going. So thanks again for allowing me to be part of this webinar today. I really appreciate it. I'll hand it back over to you, Joseph.
Thank you very much, Matthew. What a great presentation. I hope you all got a ton of great nuggets of information and actionable items that we can use both in our homes, in our businesses, and beyond. A special thank you to Demi Little as well for joining us and providing the planned expertise. Now, we do have some questions that were submitted that we're going to respond to. But again, as a reminder, if anyone has a question that wasn't asked yet, please put it in the Q&A. We have Matt from the law enforcement side, and of course, Demi from the plan side. So if you have any questions about how this applies to our security operations, direct those questions to her. But to kick us off, our first question, I'm just going to go from the top down. From an anonymous attendee, would you classify an active threat as someone who deliberately stops their car on the freeway in front of you to cause a potential accident? They mentioned the situation happened to them a couple weeks ago on the freeway, and what steps should they take in that moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would not classify that as an active threat. Here in California, that could be construed as, at the most, maybe assault with a deadly weapon. You know, think about an active threat as it's something that's occurring and ongoing. It's not stopping. The violence is not stopping. It's continuing to go. And that's kind of the difference where this car accident, this staged accident, this assault, whatever it may be, is kind of a single incident. And so I'll go back to that question. Lost the question. Where'd it go?
It's any other guidance you can share? I'm sorry, wrong question. Oh, here we
Would
go.
you classify an active threat as someone who deliberately stops their car on the freeway in front of you to cause a potential accident?
Yeah, I already answered. I answered that part of it, but the guidance I would give you is to just getting those cameras installed on your car is a good idea. Snapping a quick picture of that license plate, but ultimately, we don't want to aggravate the situation, right? We don't want to be part of the problem. You can notify law enforcement and get everybody over to the right shoulder, off the freeway, out of the roadway, so we're not causing other traffic issues, because that's also a huge danger too, just staying out in the middle of the roadway when traffic is flowing. A lot of people get hurt and killed doing that. But stay cool, notify law enforcement. If the situation started getting pretty hairy, you feel like you're not safe and your car is able to drive, then get out of there.
Thank you, Matt. Next question. Are the steps for schools the same as the general information you provided? Additionally, is there any other guidance you can share on how schools can prepare for or prevent active shooter incidents?
Yeah, in general, it's the same.
We have a question from Karen Brady. Does 911 or does 911 receive text messages?
Some 911 stations will, not all of them. You have to check with your local law enforcement agency to see if they have that capability.
Right. And then I think we have a couple more final questions here. Let me just go through them. There's a lot of people thanking you, Matt, of course, for your service and for the webinar. I'm just sorting through. Got a couple more here.
Yeah, Matt, I have one here for you. What are the most common security vulnerabilities in buildings, and how can they be mitigated?
Ooh, that's a good question. Most common security vulnerabilities. Trying to think about where I work, and I would say just allowing access to people that shouldn't have access to the building, right? If you have the ability to restrict access based on your business type, then absolutely do that. And having that face of the company, that security guard, be trained in that kind of customer service way, but also with the authority given to them by the management of the company to make sure people aren't getting access to where they shouldn't be. That'd be one of the major vulnerabilities there, just people going where they shouldn't go.
And I think I'd add to that, just to make sure that you have a consistent and enforced security policy in the building. Make sure that whatever the security policy is set forward, whether it's, announcing visitors, whether it's signing in people coming in, make sure that it's consistently enforced, not, this person, oh, well, we know this person or that person. Consistency is a big part of making sure that it's properly, properly handled and keeping everybody safe.
Yeah, I think a lot of that will go into the next question asked here from Elizabeth. Can you recommend an office setup or anything we should have in our office to prevent this from happening or help LEOs when they arrive, i.e. panic buttons under desks, desks facing the entrances, or etc.?
Yeah, you can really go crazy with this. You can set up your security personnel, depending on whether or not you have armed security that are openly armed, meaning that you can actually see visibly that they have a pistol and a little badge next to them. You can make it a little bit more covert, where you have security personnel who are carrying a weapon on them, a pistol, but it's concealed under a blazer jacket or something like that. Or you could have different, depending on how much money you want to invest into it, bulletproof glass or different structures that are able to stop bullet impacts could be in there. Yeah, panic buttons are good, and that's kind of what when I talked about with the lighting, right? So you could hit a panic button and maybe it would notify law enforcement, hey, a panic button was activated at this address. But it's also setting some lighting signals to the back area so that other individuals know, uh-oh, there's, the blue light's going off. It's time to get out of here. Hopefully that answers your question. Helping Leos arrive. I'm really a fan of just getting involved with your local law enforcement officers out there. They have community outreach police officers that are specifically there their job isn't patrol. Their job is to go out and interact with the community and different businesses, and different departments kind of do this generally the same with a little bit different flavor depending on the department. It could be the department's public information officer that's responsible for this as like a kind of a code duty or other duty as assigned. But get them out there and have them take a look at it and do an assessment of your security and see what they think about it. It's always good to get actual physical eyes on from someone else who's not in the company that can kind of look at it from the eye of potentially a bad guy.
Nice. And I think, Demi, you may be able to help with this question. What screening personality test do you recommend for future employees? I know for Plan personally, we go through some screening, rigorous tests and things like that. So you can provide some insight for that as well.
I mean, realistically, the screening is, just making sure that you're properly vetting somebody, making sure that, we are running background checks. If you have somebody who's a rehire, obviously running a background check on that person as well. And a lot of it really comes down to, speaking with the person, but sometimes you can screen as much as you want, and the best people come across as the best candidates, and you can prepare as much as you can, but you always have to anticipate the unexpected. So, whether it's the background checks, whether it's, we don't generally, I know within law enforcement or military, or, there are psychological background screening, and there are other items available. There used to be the Chally tests, and there used to be all of these different things that you can take if you wanted to go that far, and sometimes those are not foolproof, so it's not something you want to give yourself a false sense of security, but be prepared as much as possible, and look into some of the things that are out there other than just a background check.
Yeah, great.
Any other questions on the list there, Ryan?
We have one more from Kathleen. If individuals come to evaluate and we cannot implement their recommendations, is that worse?
I don't think it's worse. I mean, we can't have all the bells and whistles. Everybody has a budget. You just have to be smart with it and kind of like prioritize what's the most important thing. If you're getting a list of recommendations, take that list of recommendations and put it into a list of priorities and work down from there. And maybe you don't get everything done that year, but maybe you have this 3-year plan where you get everything tightened down within 3 years, but you get the most important things done in the first year, as an example. So I don't think it's terrible, and I wouldn't be shocked. I'd actually be more shocked if everybody's like, oh yeah, we can implement all that right now. I wouldn't be surprised if people are like, okay, we can only do 2 of the 5 recommendations, and then we'll tackle the rest later.
And I would even just add to that is, even if you don't, financially don't have the steps to be able to, yes, we all want to be able to put the panic buttons in, or to be able to put additional, security TVs in and all of that. But sometimes the easiest and best way is just continue to prepare yourself. Visit the FBI websites, visit the DHS websites, look into the videos, look into the continued preparation, speak to your teams. Do they have a backup plan? Do they have, an escape route? If you're in an office, what am I going to do if I hear something? Do I have a desk? Do I have a bookcase, something that I can slide towards the door? So sometimes it's just having those types of conversations can be your first and most impactful preparation until you can implement additional measures.
Yeah, and I'll add, right, that sometimes the best extra step is just having some sort of visible deterrent, right? So like Demi and Matt were saying, not everyone's gonna have the fanciest cameras shining on all the areas in your apartment building or community, right? But having a physical body there, whether it's your front desk staff or an actual security guard, right? That's going to make a potential perpetrator think twice, right? Because there's someone there, they don't know what those capabilities of that security guard, of that front desk person is. And so they're going to think twice about it and hopefully not go about with what they were doing. So, and of course, if there's any questions on any of those services or how we operate on site with our processes and procedures, right, taking into account everything that we learned today, as well as our different law enforcement best practices, obviously, please reach out to Planned. But I believe that is all of our questions for today. I know we went a little bit over, so I just want to thank everyone again for your time and attendance today. It's been a pleasure to speak and present this information to you. As you see on the screen, all the information will be made available for you in case you want to replay the webinar or review and read any of the slides over, as well as that video. That link will be up, and you can see all of the information on our LinkedIn, linkedin.com/plannedco, our website, plannedcompanies.com. And then if you have any questions about security services, or you'd like to get a free assessment or pricing on any of our services, please reach out to John Fahmy. His email is on this slide, or any of our Planned team members, and we'll get you in the right to the right direction. So thanks again. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and stay safe out there, everyone.